that's exactly part of the assessment that has been produced by staff. And if you look at what other institutions have forecasted, it's at the very low end of the range for 2027. And that's also because they take into account the most recent data available, not including Q1, because I think Q1 will give us some surprises. But if you compare headline inflation and core inflation, you can see exactly where the difference lies. And that is energy prices and the value of the euro.
Good mornings.
We also have inflation, both headline and core, returning to 2%, or 1.9% for core in 2027. And the cuts of today, the 25 basis points cut, is deliberately taking care of that inflation.
Ja, det var morsomt å se i stad. De katastrofemakrotallene. Og så går det 2 minutter, så sender Trump en melding på er det samtale med Kina?
Ja, det var det som skjedde.
Ja.
Ja, nei, jeg spekulerer litt på det der, for jeg så og leste noe tallfeil. Jeg tror det var derfor det gikk opp igjen.
Nei, det gikk opp på grunn av Trump pratet med Jinping. Stig hadde nyheten på han også.
Riktig.
Nei, jeg drev og lekte meg med gull i natt. Det var ikke så jævlig mye action natt, synes jeg, så jeg ble litt skuffet. Jeg var på klokka 3:30. Det var liksom ikke sånn...
Morsom, eller?
Hæ?
Morsom?
Ja, det var ikke noe sånn jævla volum, altså.
Nei, men jeg skal til å si, jeg hadde jo satt opp en serie med kjøp nede gjennom nå.
Jeg hørte ikke om
Han gikk jo inn, og det gikk jo rett til himmels. Jeg tok jo ut $120 eller noe sånt på noen småskitt der.
Det dritbra. Synes du det bra?
Så vågnet jeg inn en liten tier nede i botten der.
Ja. Nei, jeg gikk jo long i går, og så shortet jeg, og shortet.
Det så jeg. Men hvis du satt på dem, så skulle de jo gå inn.
Ja, men jeg har bare tatt sånne små trades. Jeg tror Gud skal til 3.500, men jeg bare så teknisk, så det...
Ja, det var over 3.400, var det ikke?
Jo.
Noe cirka.
Where we have been at rock bottom and rate ever since the euro was created.
Hva som skjer nå. Nå den midt mellom fugl og fisk. Så skal kjøpe gull etterpå. Jeg tror det skal litt ned først. Jeg tør ikke short noe mer heller, for nå prater Lagarde, ECB, satt ned renta. Det vil jo basically egentlig kjøre gull litt ned, men vi venter til å være ferdig å prate. Det live, not breaking news.
The output gap closes at the end of our projection horizon.
Jeg har lagt inn 2 limit-kjøp ned på 60-tallet igjen, også for sjokkoladen i går.
Ja, 59-60, det der han må ta mot.
Ja, kan vi se. Jeg har mer lenger ned også. Det går inn i en par på rundt 45 der omkring.
The monetary policy is transmitting quite smoothly to the economy. Credit is up. Could be
Det funker godt det der.
But credit is up. Rates are transmitting, including to corporates and mortgages. So I would say that the economy is responding quite well to our monetary policy and is delivering.
Ja, over natten må du følge med hvis du skal ha det over natta.
Did in response to one of your colleagues earlier, that more needs to be done, and what we have seen the Vice President and I when participating in the finance ministers meetings in Brussels, whether it's ECOFIN or Eurogroup, or on the occasion of Pascal Donoghue, the president of the Eurogroup, when he had dinner with us a couple of nights ago, we perceive a serious momentum to improve, to change, to simplify, to streamline, and to encourage and lock in, well, not lock in, but welcome capital into Europe. And we are seeing it. you know, the reverse Yankee bonds significant increase that we have seen in the last few weeks is a clear indication that there is trust in our system. The capital flow that we are seeing as well, whether it is, you know, European...
Ja, de gikk jo ikke inn for kort over 4 og så 5 på 6 I morges til det fredagen.
Market forces,
Gjorde de ikke.
investors, those who move real money around, actually see value and have confidence in Europe. So that would be my answer to you, to your second question. I'm not sure what you meant by higher for longer.
Men jeg skal spise ferdig, så kommer jeg tilbake igjen.
Greit, gull kan tikke helt opp til 33,93 nå. Jeg kjøper ikke. Sitter og venter. Nasdaq bør egentlig falle på de, altså jeg sier det hver dag. Men det kommer bare dårligere og dårligere makrotall fra hele eurozonen og så hele
brings together the discussions that we've had over the last 2 days, and with that I wish you a happy day, happy summer for those of you who leave early, and see you soon.
The next press conference is on the 24th of July.
All right, that was EC President Christine Lagarde speaking in Frankfurt as the central bank cuts rates for the 8th time this year. It hasn't been 9 times. If you don't remember that it was 9 times, that's because it wasn't 9 times. This is Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller alongside Katie Greifeld. You know why I say that, right?
Because President Trump truthed it the other day.
And Ferris Bueller.
And I actually did not catch that.
Getting to the end of cycle with today's rate cut. Ja, det er ikke så rart det. Da har man 9 rentekutt og sånt nå. Norge har 0.
Given up our gains, down about 0.8 or rather 0.1% when it comes
Shorta litt mer gull her nå. Kun for jeg ser her litt motstand her. Jeg tror gull skal til 3.500.
Yeah, I was also going to say relatively close to a bull market. I didn't notice that we turned back down.
Yeah.
If we rise to 59.79, and of course we had hit that for a while yesterday, we would be at 20% up from the lowest level. So we could still make it today, but we kind of retreated yesterday. So now on a closing basis, we're up 19.8% from the lows in February.
You did see the S&P 500 managed to close in the green yesterday, which was interesting. The overall index faded, but tech held up, and a lot of the future direction will be determined for the tech index tonight with the Broadcomers and a few others. But for right now, it sort of feels like a holding pattern.
Right, it does, although I think it's interesting to look at rates. We're pretty low right now at 4.35 on the 10-year. The news you're talking about that hasn't moved markets. President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping reportedly actually had a phone call. The U.S. president has been begging the Chinese president to call him for months. And so now I guess it's actually happened. Let's get the latest from Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall at the White House. So,
Nei, han hadde bokat si med damen, jeg vet ikke, I juli.
Well, Matt, we actually, according to China, they are saying that this is at the request of President Trump, which does track
Så Cecilia, det ikke Cecilie.
this White House that they would like to see these 2 leaders talk on the phone directly. Now, we are still waiting on formal confirmation from the White House, but this does contact between these 2 leaders since President Trump took office. And it really is a remarkable development considering that our reporting has
Sicily er det.
China would prefer for key advisors
Sist på norsk heter det Cecilia.
before putting Xi Jinping on the phone. And those issues really have been mounting in recent weeks, including the U.S. accusing China of skylarking those export licenses when it comes to coal and
Jeg vil ikke ha Amazonas, så fange akkater.
Nei, jeg vet ikke om man driver med, så vidt jeg tar det.
Øy! Barbados, for faen.
really do go both ways. as
Der
far
kommer
as
hun
concerns
der,
about
broken.
controls, not to mention plans to revoke
Broken?
Chinese student visas. So tensions really have
Sangeren,
been escalating
Rihanna.
here, but those are potentially, if we do get a readout
Nei.
from the White
Jo,
House,
er fra
those things that
Barbados.
we're going to be
Ja, men
watching
ikke
as, of course, this
Rihanna
comes against the
fra her.
broader
Ja, men der er det
that they are trying to
dritfint.
negotiate
Nei,
with
det er
Britain.
veldig fint i
Yeah,
Thailand.
certainly a lot
Jeg har
for
vært
those
der,
two to
Så
talk about. I
til
really
Dubai,
appreciate you
Marokko,
reporting there. That
Thailand.
Thailand er etter det finnes den jeg har vært i mitt
Kendall,
liv.
let's keep this conversation
Og
going with
alle
Michelle Weaver.
sammen
She is Morgan Stanley US
er så hyggelig gjestfri at det er helt rått. Og de er
joining
så
us
god mat der, og de er
at Desk.
serviceinnstilte. Men de har farang, da.
Thank you for having me.
Snakker
So
sikkert
let's
dritt om det
take
bare
the
grillen, men
temperature
det er
when it
faen meg
comes
fint
to
sted,
trade
altså.
talks and how the market is reading this, because as Matt said, we initially saw a spike when we
Oof,
got
that
the
felt bad.
news that
Shut up,
actually
people.
President Xi and President
Nå
Trump
gikk jeg
had
pluss på
spoken
gullet mitt.
by phone. It quickly
La 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 la
faded
la.
down. A
La
phone
la la la
conversation
la.
is not a deal.
Gull,
There's a lot
gull,
to
gull.
work through here, but talk to us
Altså,
about
Nasdaq kan
how
bare
you
brenne
think
i
that
helvete, egentlig. For det har
I think
ingenting
there's
med
going
noen
to
ting
be
å
a
gjøre.
lot of twists and turns before the tariff matter is fully resolved. But what I think is really important from our perspective is I don't think you're going to see the levels that
Det
we
blir
saw
bare dummere og
post-Liberation
dummere,
Day.
dette.
I
Det er
think
som
the lows for
Dagsen
the
din.
year are
Det
likely
er tre
in,
selskaper
unless
som
you get a
går.
pretty dramatic shock to the market. I
Oi,
think,
nå
you know,
traff
we're
jeg på
gonna
gull, noe
continue
så
to see
jævlig.
around tariff
Så du det, eller?
headlines. Companies are trying to think about how they can
Du kan bare kalle meg
manage tariff
Gullgutten.
risks. Investors are
Skål!
trying to think about that. But in terms of the broad equity market, I think the lows are in for the year, and we're just going to continue trading
Nå vi begynner på nytt igjen.
with some of these headlines.
Snart. Jeg trader inn masse penger på gull nå, så jeg tipper at jeg henter det mesteparten av tapet i løpet av neste uke. For da skal jeg begynne å trade med én kontrakt, ikke 0,01.
Hvilken graf er Nasdaq på det jeg ser nå, Jørgen?
Det er Nasdaq, det er Nasdaq, det er Nasdaq.
Hvilken er 1 minutt chart?
Dette er gull.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think
Nasdaq.
Nasdaq 1 minutt chart, Nasdaq 15 minutt chart. En dag.
Uff, jeg trapp på shorten min på Nasdaq. Jeg var på... Skal jeg ta?
Jeg vet ikke, jeg lite om Nasdaq, jeg gikk ikke se på Nasdaq.
We're far off the danger
Litt,
zone there. I
litt
think
klar
the
hele
tax
Nasdaq.
bill is the next thing that the market's been thinking about, but we still have a lot of negotiation to
Litt
go
klar.
around that.
Is
Helt
the
på
stock
Nasdaq.
market thinking about what's going on with the tax bill? It feels like it's being very clearly expressed on and off in the rates
Det er ikke
market.
vits
But
å
when it
trade
comes
Nasdaq.
to the stock market, I feel like it's a much
Å, fy faen, det ramla!
Absolutely. I think it's
Kanskje de endelig har skjønt at det går ikke så bra
Jeg
likevel.
er veldig nervøs for den jævla Nasdaqen.
Kanskje de skjønner nå endelig at oi,
Been crushing it in terms of returns, right? Beating its benchmarks. You're thematic and equity strategist.
Yes.
What are the themes that you're looking at? What are the ones you like?
So I'm really excited about the AI adoption.
Jeg tror det er en gap med nettet mitt. Jeg ramler ut hele tida.
Value has been accruing to the enablers, the people who are making the picks and shovels, allowing AI to be adopted at companies. But now it's time for companies to actually start putting AI into production. And we're a lot more constructive about in late 2025, early 2026, starting to see that become positive for company margins.
Well, talk to us about how that all filters through the S&P 500, because I hear what you're saying that maybe we'll start to get some of that
Endelig kom jeg i mål på den shorten der. Fy faen, jeg shorta den i dag tidlig, og så ble det
Nasdaq skal ned til 16 000. Hva er det pisset vi ser her? Det er bare tull. Så ser gull også, da. Gull må ned til 3372. I just called to say I love you. Å, fy, for hørte jeg det fine tonen, eller?
Our mid-year forecast for next year at 6,500, so
I
very
just
constructive on the index
called.
overall. And then I would say the next key thing to look for the equity
Tror jeg skal ta
market
det
is what's
som venter på en
happening
ny
with earnings
runde.
revision
Jeg
spread.
har ikke tro på
We've
at den
seen
skal
earnings
falle
revision spreads
skikkelig
start to
nok
hook up
Dere
pretty
troa?
substantially for the market.
Må ha troa.
We're also seeing
Må
that
troa.
metric driven
Jeg
more
har troa i
by
5
positive
uker.
revisions
Det går
rather
på.
than
Ja, men de som mister troa, er de som taper. De som har troa, de tjener alltid penger.
Jo, men jeg har gevinst nå. Har ikke all gevinst bedre enn ingen gevinst?
Jo.
Your preferred place to
Skal jeg ikke bare
invest?
ta
I
den?
mean, you are
Nasdaq skal brenne i
Så nå skal jeg
helvete.
ta den, og så kommer det til å gå ned 100 poeng til.
your
Ta den.
Skal vi vedde?
Du har ikke ta litt gevinst. Vær flink nå.
jealousy.
Nei, nå
No,
er
we're
det
still,
ikke
as a
flink.
house, we're still calling for U.S. over international.
Jeg har den
That's
akkurat der.
partially a function of the
Og
better
du har den der
earnings
nede.
revision
Og du
picture in
driver
the
med så
US
her.
versus
Jeg gjorde noe i
international.
dag, da.
It's also
Det er
about
ikke
the
likt
dollar.
deg.
Our forecast is for
Tror du
91
skulle
on the
falle? Det var jo
DXY,
rett
which
og slett.
represents around a 17%
Og du tok den ikke nå?
move
Tok den i dag
from
tidlig?
the
Ja.
highs,
Ja, men
and
da
that
falt
will be
det.
really beneficial for
Og
multinational
gull skal til helvete.
companies in the US.
Men gull skal egentlig opp. Gull skal egentlig opp til 3500, sånn egentlig.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, we gotta leave it there.
Lurer på så tar jeg litt gevinst på gull, så alle blir glad i meg.
That is Morgan Stanley's Michelle Weaver.
Se på gull, folkens! Oi, oi, oi!
A bit of a leg lower in the first 18
Nå funker jo ikke
minutes
musa.
of the trade. I want to take a look at the breakdown right now. When you look at
Se
the
gull, da.
single stock level, we started out again in the green, but now you can
Mouse,
see that the
border.
breadth is getting worse and worse. You have
Faen
over
på mobilen.
300 companies
Faen.
in the
Faen
red
på
right
mobilen.
now. Just
Slutt.
about 174,
Mouse,
75 in the green,
Ah,
but still leading,
sånn.
and this is good news, is
Skjønner
some
du?
of your big tech names, Amazon,
Nå
Alphabet,
fungerer.
Microsoft, the
Full
list goes on,
kontroll.
but very small moves overall, so that downside
Nå tar vi
starting to
gevinst
overwhelm here,
på
because right at the top,
gull.
Tesla down almost 6%, that's taking 6 points off the big index, Nvidia too.
Skal vi se om vi treffer på gull her, da. Det er $7 nå på gull.
Let's take a look at how this is
Jonas,
translating into the
Jonas,
sector
Jonas.
picture as well.
Hva
Because
du tror
up
også
at
her?
the top, you do have
På hva da?
communication
På
services,
gull.
but a small move.
At jeg er
Energy
gullgutten.
and
Hva du tror på
materials
det?
also
Ja,
fighting to
men
stay
jeg
green
er
right now.
Nasdaq,
Then
ja.
you go down the bottom.
Å,
with
fy
absolutely
faen, så gull, da.
more red financials, consumer discretionary, and
Jeg
PC
leser
being
gull som jeg
leser,
leser Gustav.
Let's shift gears here for a moment and talk about the jobs market and really Google, because Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai
Nasdaq er bare
says his
driter,
company
for den
will continue
lever sin egen verden.
emphasizing human talent as the AI boom continues. They'll continue hiring.
Nei, vent, Story. Ikke gjør ennå.
Replace them with artificial
Vi må vente.
intelligence.
Nei, jeg vil ikke.
Men han får jo ikke med seg de gamle, han får med seg det nye du gjør nå. Og det du gjør nå funker jo.
Ok, da.
Så hvorfor skal folk vente?
For jeg kommer til å gjøre noen rare trades på kontoen for å så rette opp den Nasdaq-traden. Det er bare det jeg sier.
Jo, men han har ikke Nasdaq-reisene.
Nei, men jeg gjør en motposisjon på Nasdaqen, så får den nye. Hvis jeg føler at jeg skal kjøpe Nasdaq for å hedge meg, ikke sant? Så får han med seg hedgen, så jeg ikke får med seg den gamle.
Ja, han får med seg longen på
Ja,
Nasdaq.
nettopp.
Men kjenner jeg deg rett, så kommer du
Joining us
aldri
now is
hente deg på
Bloomberg
Nasdaq.
Intelligence Global Head of Tech Research,
Gjort det to ganger.
Mandeep Singh. And Mandeep,
Jeg
it
kommer aldri til å
does
gjøre
look like we're going to need a lot more engineers, even with AI. We
Gull
won't
skal
need
videre ned.
private equity fund managers, apparently.
According to the Vista CEO.
What's your outlook for hiring in Silicon
Og så er det mange som sier, hvorfor skal gull falle nå når markedet faller? Nei, det er fordi det er liksom, den snakker til meg.
That he's looking to hire more engineers. At the same time, everyone is looking for ways to, do more in terms of AI agents and just,
Nå går det penger
the
på
field
shorten
of
på
large
Nasdaq,
language
faktisk.
models. It's evolving in terms of how
Her
their
har du.
search product is changing. So
Du har den derfra, tenker
there
jeg.
are a lot of
78, 80,
optimizations that will
60,
happen
21,
in
60,
terms of
80. Der
the
er det, ja.
engineers and how they'll be used across different products within Google.
Hvorfor ler du av meg?
Nei, for du har den akkurat der hvor han snur. Så det er helt sykt. Det er sånn med alle. Alle har dem akkurat der de liksom, hvis de går langt så får de.
Lenge før den grafen du ser nå. Jeg hadde den jo fra 10%.
Jo, men det er jo poenget at
Og da så det ut som det skulle ned.
Jo, det er ikke det jeg sier. Poenget er at alle gjør det samme. Alle setter stoppløsene samme stedet. Alle gjør det samme. Hvis du spør dem på chatten, jeg sier hvor de har kjøpt akkurat samme der hvor du har kjøpt.
Jeg har ikke kjøpt, jeg har solgt.
Det er solgt, da. Nei, alle kjøper, det er bare vi som går sånn. Hele verden går langt, det er bare vi som bare nei, nei.
70% despite the China headwind, and they wrote down, quite almost like 7% of their revenue that they couldn't sell to China. Broadcom has a very high exposure to Google. Almost 50%
Broadcom to report
revenue
after the bell.
comes from Google
Å, fy
CPUs.
faen.
And Broadcom is a much lower run rate, $18 billion business as opposed to Nvidia.
Den er på all time high, de må levere bra dag, ellers går det skikkelig
on that
der.
AI side. So clearly there's a lot of runway for Broadcom, and Broadcom last earnings mentioned they added 2 new hyperscalers. Now those 2 could be OpenAI and probably Meta or someone else, maybe they are exposed to Project Stargate. We
Hello.
don't know exactly, but clearly they are gaining more customers who are thinking about moving out of NVIDIA's ecosystem and doing more custom ASICs. So from that standpoint, I think any new customer they add will add, probably 10 billion plus in revenue down the line for Broadcom. And it is somewhat of a zero-sum game to my mind. If you're moving away from NVIDIA, you're probably coming to Broadcom.
All right.
All right, there you have it. And hopefully we'll be able to name those big customers soon. That is Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence. Now we also want to talk about Lululemon, the next big retailer to report earnings with the first quarter results coming after the bell. Bloomberg Intelligence says that sales growth could slow to as little as 6%, weighed down by, you guessed it, tariff concerns and consumer spending. Shares are down more than 12% this year, but higher by about 9% over the past year. So let's break it down now with Bloomberg Intelligence senior U.S. retail analyst Poonam Goyal. So Poonam, we had Gap report in the last couple of weeks. It seems like Athleta didn't fare too well. How does that tee us up for Lululemon after the bell?
I
think it's a little bit of a different story here. Lululemon has made progress from where it was with really getting better merchandise and a color wave in stores. So we do think that this quarter will shape out to be in line with their guidance, which is for a 6 to 7% increase. The one thing I'd say that Lululemon is doing well right now is that they're adding a more casual flair to their assortments. And that's interesting because as wardrobes shift and consumers rebalance it, moving away a little from activewear and into more work casual wear, they're going to benefit from that.
Yeah, I have to say, I exclusively wear Lululemon pretty much to work. So.
I hope they don't get away, though, from the yoga pants. I just like this, the standard yoga pants.
All right. For yourself, I assume you're talking about.
Of course.
Punas, moving swiftly along here. Talk to us a little bit about the competitive environment here. I mean, when you put aside tariffs and consumer spending concerns, which is hard to do, I mean, you think about the fact that you do have Athleta, you do have Vuori, you do have Alo. It feels like this space is getting more and more crowded.
I think the space was actually always crowded. In addition to those names, you also have Nike, Adidas, and the traditional activewear companies really making a big push on fashion style to get them also in that, casual athletic flair. What I'd say that Lululemon is doing well is they have the customer base, right? They have a loyal following of people who just love what they have. And as long as they get the assortments and the color palette right, which is where they, you could say, messed up a little last year, I think they're still on the way to gain share, especially internationally, where they do have a goal to quadruple sales. And I think they're going to be able to do that for 2026.
All right, Poonam, thanks very much. Poonam Goyal from Bloomberg Intelligence talking to us about Lululemon. 40 analysts cover Lulu on the Bloomberg terminal.
Right.
20 buys and 20 not.
Yeah.
They've just been up and down, up and down, up and down, and finishing like unchanged over the last 5 years.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing to see it pretty much flat over the past 5 years, to your point. Extremely high peaks and valleys there. Let's take a quick check on this U.S. market overall, though, because I'm a little bit surprised here to see gains fade, those pre-market gains that we saw after we got news of that President Trump, President Xi phone call. We're now pretty firmly in the red here.
Well, nothing came of it, and
right, but they got on the phone, which was hard to do.
True. I mean, he got on the phone with Vladimir Putin.
That's true as well.
And there's not any peace in Ukraine right now. Coming up in the next hour, Emily Rowland joins us from John Hancock. She says earnings growth is diminishing. We'll talk to her as well as the man behind Sony and Honda's smart car. This is Bloomberg.
Building another art museum called the Guggenheim. Now, Louvre's big enough. Why do you need a Guggenheim as well, right next door?
I think it's a great question. I think the beautiful thing about the UAE and Abu Dhabi is we live with over 200 nationalities. And in doing so, they have become a part of the country's and the city's fabric. And we need to celebrate that. So we need to celebrate everybody's identity, everybody's background, everybody's heritage, everybody's history. And what a beautiful way in doing so in these beautiful institutions. These museums are educational institutions and they're community institutions. So we wanted to curate really a story where you come to Saadiyat Cultural District and you, if you allow me to curate the story, you start off at the Natural History Museum. And at the Natural History Museum, you get a glimpse and you get an understanding of how we came to be, how our Earth came to be, how our universe came to be, from a scientific perspective. Once you leave the Natural History Museum, you go to our National Museum, the Sheikh Zayed National Museum. There you understand the history of this great land, not just the history of the country, but the people of this land that have been a part of this land for over 300,000 years. You get a glimpse of what the past and the present and the future looks like here in the UAE. From there, you maneuver yourself to the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which is a beautiful universal museum. It is universal in its thematic approach. So there, you basically see a part of you on an equal pedestal with the entire world.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute tech news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Ed Ludlow in Las Vegas, and this is Bloomberg.
CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. Breaking the ice on the president's budget bill. Sources tell CBS News House Speaker Mike Johnson and Elon Musk texted last night, and they agreed to speak by phone today about differences over the package Mr. Trump calls big and beautiful. Musk has trashed it. CBS's Torian Small looks at the numbers.
CBO put out an estimate that has about $2 trillion in additions to the deficit. And then, of course, this bill comes with a $5 trillion price tag that would lift the debt ceiling, which hasn't sat well with those fiscal conservative hawks.
Musk is calling on his followers to urge their congressional representatives to kill the bill. We've just learned from Chinese state media President Trump and Xi Jinping spoke by phone today. The likely topic of conversation, stalled tariff negotiations, roiling global trade. Filings for first-time jobless benefits haven't been this high in 8 months. The Labor Department reports they rose by 8,000 last week. President Trump is resurrecting and expanding a travel ban policy from his first term. Correspondent Ed O'Keefe.
It targets people from specific countries in the Western Hemisphere, like Haiti and Venezuela, as well as places in Africa like Libya and Somalia. There's also Afghanistan and others.
Prosecutors have released never-before-seen journal entries they say were written by Luigi Mangione, the young man charged with murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a New York hotel in December. CBS's Lilia Luciano.
Prosecutors allege Mangione wrote, quote, 1.5 months. The investor conference is a true windfall. It embodies everything wrong with our health system.
Cleanup continues in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. WTOP's John Doman.
First it was hundreds, now at least 2,000 gallons of diesel that have leaked into the water there, and crews have been working non-stop since yesterday to contain it.
Du, det var ikke noe lyd for faen. Jeg sa, sånn som jeg treder gull nå, så pleier vanligvis også å trede Nasdaq. Men Nasdaq har ikke jeg tredet nå nesten på over en måned. For den helt fucked. Men vi traff den helt jævlig på gull nå, det skal sies.
The Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of an American-Israeli couple killed in Hamas' October 7th attack. The BBC
3372 nivået på gull, hva må bryte for at jeg skal shorte mer gull.
Had a normal routine of walking around the kibbutz in the morning, and during that time they were murdered and their bodies taken into Gaza.
The Dow is down 185. This is CBS News.
Og så sa jeg også det at Tesla er nesten 6%. Jeg synes det er rart at Nasdaq ikke faller mer. Jeg synes det er veldig merkelig. Dow Jones er ned 160 poeng, Nasdaq er ned 14 poeng. Så det er jo bare latterlig. Burde jo ha vært ulovlig. Fjolleri, lureri, tulleri. Kom igjen nå. Tull. Ikke noe, bare tull.
It's a big day for video gamers.
Long lines from Tokyo to Toronto and at a Best Buy in Burbank, California.
The line was wrapped around the building. It was so long.
He got what a lot of people want. Nintendo's much anticipated Switch 2 video game console, which has gone on sale.
Å, fy faen! Se Gud ramla!
Ian Scher says it launches in a different environment.
Dag Tore, jeg hater Nasdaq. Du trenger ikke lage meg sånn feit, da! Faen, da!
The Switch 2 retails for $449.99. Steve Kathan, CBS News.
A senior prank at Malibu Highs caused tens of thousands of dollars in damages. Students superglued wires door, set a golf cart on fire, and pushed it down the stairs. This class
Faen meg samme cappe hadde
To
også.
be a prank, it's not even funny
Jeg
anymore.
hater Nasdaq. Det skal jeg faen meg ta vare
Deborah
på.
Rodriguez, CBS News.
Å, se Gud, da!
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
Hvorfor går Nasdaq opp når Tesla er ned 6%?
Oi. Nå går lånene mine inn sånn.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
Se på den tekniske grafen til Øyvind.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney. Bloomberg Radio.
Hva faen er det der for noe? Når disse plutselig oppganger skjer. Hva faen er det der for noe? Hva fy faen for noe?
Jeg har kjøpt en handel der.
Det blir en bra møter. Det er sånn teknisk graf som mora mi kunne lagd, men det funker sikkert da. Det er det verste av alt.
Ja, du har kjøpt en handel.
Se på det
Det gjør sånn.
Det var funnet da. Kjøpe gull snart da. Den går opp og ned. Driter de på bildet. Skal holde på samme sted. Å, fy faen.
Ja, så det er ikke det nå.
Hva har vi deg i bakgrunnen? Hva er det du driver med? Det skal ikke skje noe. Gull tryner jo, Nasdaq kommer litt grann ned. Er det ikke? Nei. Det var litt dumt da, når vi alle andre sitter og koser oss med gårdsjokk. Drit noe ju da.
Og ned $40. Det tar stund.
Slumdog, det er en sånn graf som jeg kjenner. Det er sånn jeg treda før.
Den er fin.
Hvor mye på copy står det? Dere har råd til å tape. Så hvis du blåser opp pengene dine, så kan du bytte på litt.
Jeg tror Propina er noe.
Er Propina long gull? Propina, er det long gull? Den er long gull, helvete.
Men det skal jo opp da.
Det skal opp til slutt. Oi, helvete, møkk, fitte og hore. Jeg har tenkt det hver dag på Nasdaq. Hvis det er noe trøst. Hver dag. Jeg sitter som den største idioten av alle, liksom. Jeg kan aksjer, shorte Nasdaq, får noe tryne hver dag, liksom. Jeg savner kråka mi, men jeg lovte Geir innpå her at jeg ikke skal ha kråka på meg i dag. Og Espen, de tvang meg til ikke å ha kråka her.
Hvor har du kråka nå?
Han er på kjøkkenet på kjøleskapet og driter i posen til Sahar. Neida, han er på kjøkkenet. 228 milliarder. Hva har du gjort for noe, Marsko?
go right to Penn
There's no
Station. You walk on.
TSA, there's no security. It's like, it's a different kind of stress. I'm gonna call on this one, I'm sorry. But you and Mike can fly, and Paul and I will take the train. All right, Alex Steele, alongside Paul Sweeney. We are
Og du som nekta å ha Gustav på live. Ja, greit.
Let's kick it off with Dollar Tree.
Yeah, let's take a look
Skal
at
sette inn
Dollar Tree.
nekta mer greier.
Gaining.
Jeg skal forsøke, Story. På gull så går det sikkert fint. På Nasdaq så jeg skal ikke røre Nasdaq fremover. Skal drite det. Shorten er ganske kraftig fra 21. Gratulerer, Marsko. Det er dritbra, da. Jeg tør ikke trade Nasdaq mer, jeg. For det er Trump, hver gang det faller så kommer Trump med en eller annen nyhet, så er det klin umulig å forholde seg til det. Men for gull under 3000 skal jeg sjekke. Ja, det vil det.
Kimberly Clark.
Maybe, baby.
Kimberly Clark, ticker KMB, that's down now more than 2% at the moment. So again,
Han stoppa nettopp på da, på 66.
And that comes after the news that they're going to be selling a majority stake in their global Kleenex and tissue businesses outside.
Hvor jeg kjøper gull,
The deal is that
hvor jeg kjøper gullen, Prefina?
with this Brazilian
2 sekunder,
supplier
skal vi se.
Suzano. That's going to be valued at more than $3 billion.
Han må bryte
51% stake.
Han må bryte Jeg kjøper om han kommer ned til 3,359,60. Hvis han ikke tar imot der, så faller han helt ned til jeg skal ikke si det høyt igjen, for det er ingen som kommer til å tro meg. 3,325-ish kan gull falle.
Hey, why don't you take these 3 brands, sell them here? I think I got some buyers here, and you just do that all day long. That's all they do. And sometimes they hit like this one.
Sto i vaskekjelen og hørte på, og du skreik, så rakk ikke å ta dem, men jeg har hatt short som sikkert en stund.
You just can't. Just those 2 things. Everything else, like generic all the way. Even toilet paper, generics are
Nå driver J-Master også og kjøper gull.
So
Kanskje det er håp, Prefina.
For everyone. All right, Brown-Forman tumbling hard here, down by over 15%. So this is the owner of Jack Daniels. They'd already been warning about a tariff impact. So what happened now?
That's right, Alex. And so, yeah, we did see that in their report. Reported after that yesterday. EPS and sales missing estimates. And they're also expecting their fiscal 2026 organic net sales to decline. So it's not just fourth quarter.
Jeg skal gi Gustav mat og skåle klokka 2 minutter.
So from that report, Brown-Forman saying that they do anticipate the operating environment for fiscal 2026 to be challenging. They're citing low visibility due to macroeconomic and geopolitical volatility. So that's ticker BF/. Now, yeah, more than 50%.
I just don't see how these tariffs are good politically. I mean, now you're upsetting our friends in Kentucky and Tennessee, and I just don't.
Tax cuts? I don't know.
I guess, but boy, I mean.
Create more American jobs? I don't know.
I'm
just saying what we hear.
I'm just wondering.
I mean, it's a fair point. It's not great. And then plus in general, like, do we drink as much in the U.S. as we used to? I'm looking just at Paul at this point. I don't know why I'm doing that, but
certainly not as much as in the UK. I can tell you that much.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good combination there. All right. Thanks so much, Christine. We appreciate that. For more conversations just like this, subscribe to our new Stock Movers reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports and the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere that you listen. All right, we got a slew of economic data that came out this morning. Initial jobless claims, not great. Unit labor costs higher. Productivity lower. It didn't feel really great. Let's get Michael McKee, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy Correspondent. How would you describe this data this morning?
Not great.
Is it like a B minus, C plus?
You know, maybe I'd give it a B minus. And I'll explain why. But first, I did want to mention something. You were right. You're right about Band-Aids. This is one of those facts you learn that you never get to express anywhere. But I know somebody who is in the business of retailing things like that. And a lot of companies have generic brand Band-Aids. And the story is that they cannot afford the Chinese-made generic.
Kan jeg lese opp meldingen min? Forstår du hva jeg prøver å si? Er jeg mute?
Ja, jeg skal mute deg.
Jeg skriver, får du høre?
You may have put your finger on the whole problem with tariffs is can't get generic Band-Aids anymore.
No, but also generic Band-Aids are bad. That was my point.
Oh. Well,
Aren't they on the
I'm
same
going to
thing?
stay out of that one.
I'm serious. Okay. Anyway,
All right.
we digress.
Jobless claims are bad, 247, but it's the highest in 8 months. But the problem is, and unfortunately, I have only a black and white chart, so we can't show it on the color radio. But this is the time of year when we start to get into seasonal distortions that have gotten worse since COVID. The non-seasonally adjusted jobless claims went down, and the seasonally adjusted went up significantly. And this has been happening for a couple of weeks, and then you look at the last couple of years and you see the same pattern. So is this a message about what's going to happen? Maybe. Or is, Neil Dutta and I were talking about it, and he says yes. Or is it just sort of a head fake? Maybe the auto companies have started retooling earlier because they aren't selling as many cars, don't need to they have some space to do it. So that's something to keep an eye on at this point. We've had a lot of announcements. Disney, Procter & Gamble today about layoffs, although Procter & Gamble said 7,000 over 2 years, and they didn't say what country. So we're not sure yet, which is part of the reason that you have to take this, not so much with a big grain of salt, but just say, okay, that's interesting. Let's see what happens in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, the trade balance is not a surprise. We saw that in the advanced trade numbers because we stopped buying things from overseas. Imports went down 15.5%, which is the biggest fall on record. And the trade balance falls by more than half, which is the biggest fall on record. But think back to the first quarter where we had bad growth figures because we imported so much. This is going to have the opposite effect. And then while the unit labor costs that Alex mentioned are old news, I mean, this is first quarter news, it does suggest that there's higher pressure on prices for companies. And it's part of that whole, are we seeing an inflation and stagnation thing at the same time?
Which is kind of what you were talking about yesterday, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the notes I got from Wall Street economists, I kept seeing stagflation in the title, so that's coming back. But if I look at today's data, Michael, as you were just explaining it, as well as yesterday's ISM data, I think these economists are kind of getting it right. They've been telling us, maybe not the tariffs themselves, but the uncertainty associated with tariffs, that could lead to slower economic growth, or that could lead to higher prices. I don't know. It feels like that's coming to fruition right now.
Well, that's one of the things that Fed officials have been talking about, that companies have been sitting on the sidelines, not sure what to do, but at some point they're going to have to make a decision. And some of them may be coming off the sidelines now and just going ahead and raising prices in advance of tariffs. Some things have gone up in price, but just betting that something's going to happen. Part of it because they want to protect their margins, and part of it is they're probably testing the waters. We saw in the last inflation, when it started, people were raising prices more than their costs were going up because they hadn't been able to raise prices in years. And so they were taking advantage of it. And maybe that's a little bit of what we're seeing now. There have been some studies out recently that suggest that when Trump announced the tariffs, people raised some prices. Then when he put the 90-day hold on it, they didn't lower those prices. So businesses are maybe not anxious to test whether they lose market share, but they're willing to do it if they think that things are going to continue in that direction.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Economics and Policy correspondent. Also, I lost my kid, so if you see, oh no, she's back.
Yeah, she's back.
I didn't know she was back. I was
she's
like,
right
can you go get my daughter for me? Who's roaming around the office? Never mind.
No.
Oh, she snuck in very quietly. Look at that. All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. And then, of course, Jobs Friday tomorrow going to be quite interesting. We typically wind up seeing actually the S&P up on Jobs Day. Terrell over at the desk made a really good chart on that, so we'll see if that holds.
I'll tell you how important
today.
tomorrow's Jobs Day is. I'm coming in tomorrow.
Yeah, that's because it's raining. I don't think this is actually like a really good indicator. It's because it's like I'm gonna save my beach day.
Yeah.
All right, coming up, we're gonna break down the markets with Nancy Daoud, Private Wealth Advisor at Ameriprise Financial and CEO of Opus. Right, if you're investing for the long term, how do you manage all the
Ja, men det min faktura til meg. Det ikke faktura til deg. Du setter en feil.
White House, apparently there was a talk
Du
between President Trump and President Xi, according to Chinese reports. So we will discuss the latest on that. This is
Jeg tror
Bloomberg.
ikke hun lar den gå, for jeg er momspliktig, så burde det vært MVA på den fakturaen. Så jeg tror jeg må betale en eller annen form for moms uansett.
Ja, men det er ikke noe å si.
Jeg har drittmoms. folk skal ta profitt på Nasdaq. Botox, har du ikke lyst på noe?
Nei, ikke det jeg vet om. Det var din, ja. Det er helt merkelig at Nasdaq ikke faller. Tesla er 5% liksom. Ja, Meta. Ja. Ta litt mer gevær på gul.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash, brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half in cloud infrastructure. This for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Right now, the major stock averages, they are pushing lower. Initially had that bout of optimism when we got word of the phone call between President Xi of China and President Trump. No details on that, at least so far. Stocks again pushing lower right now. The S&P 500, 9 points lower. That's down about 0.2%. 59.61 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, 101 points lower. That's down 0.25%. The Nasdaq 100, 10 points lower right now. Some of the earnings just got Brown-Forman, owner of Jack Daniels, falling the most in 15 years. Results trailed expectations. They also projected a sales decline in the current fiscal year. Brown-Forman right now down over 15%.
Nei, Nico, tredje bare på den vanlige. Den har vi skulle røre ikke.
Broadcom, they're expected to report strong second quarter earnings driven by heavy spending on AI
selv
with a focus on its revenue forecast and potential new cloud computing customers. By the way, that stock, the valuation, that has ballooned. 35 times projected earnings they're trading at over the next 12 months. Ahead of the earnings, they've just moved higher. Broadcom shares up about 0.2%. You see this one? Sotheby is going to auction the original Hermes Birkin bag that once belonged to the late singer Jane Birkin, one of the most coveted designs in the fashion industry.
So price tag?
Well, it's an auction. It's a black leather handbag put up for sale in Paris on July 10th. Well, let me just put this in perspective. The record for a bag sold at auction is held by an Hermes Kelly, known as Himalaya, made in crocodile skin and carrying a diamond. That fetched $510,000. It was auctioned off by Christie's in 2021. So apparently these things like sell more for on the secondary market than they do in the stores because they're so hard to get.
Yes, 100%. And Birkins are, I mean, to be fair, I don't understand the point of the Birkin bag. I'm just going to put that out there. But, they can retail, like, if you get crocodile and stuff like that, I mean, we're talking, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the retail market, like you just said, is huge.
Do they have to hurt the crocodile to make the bag?
I'm thinking yes, because I'm thinking it doesn't come with the crocodile.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. John Tucker joining us. All right, Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news in business, economics, and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies and 130 industries.
Men det vi ser nå med Nasdaq gir null mening.
Early reports this morning from the Chinese press say that President Trump and President Xi held a call as they're still dealing with things like trade and technology, steel and aluminum tariffs, and all the like. So we wanted to get the latest reporting on this with Hadriana Loenkran. She joins us now from D.C. as a White House reporter. Okay, so did they actually hold a call, and what was discussed?
So we are still waiting to hear back from more confirmation from the White House, but that is something that we are understanding from the side of China. We know that the president has been wanting that for some time, believing that really the two leaders need to sit down and not just sort of their delegations, their senior officials, which we know had been happening. We had the Treasury Secretary, and there were talks when dealing with China on trade. Now this would, of course, mark a huge step as the call before this would have been
Tesla ned 5%.
Would have been before the inauguration. So this definitely marks a big step, and we are reading more details, and we will get them to you as soon as we can.
And Hadriana, I think the biggest mystery to me, it's important that they spoke if they did in fact speak.
På katastrofemakertall at ikke det tryner. Dow Jones faller da.
How come he's not out front breaking this news? That's usually his style. To me, one of the most surprising things is we haven't yet heard from President or the administration. What are you making of that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that could be why, we're so used to finding the news out via his Truth Social post. We haven't yet seen a post, so that is a great question as to who is kind of holding what narrative. We know that on the side of China that they had actually indicated that President Trump had initiated the call. So there's some interesting things going on there in terms of which narrative do we want to have, who started it, who reached out first. So now we're waiting to hear how President Trump describes it, and of course hoping for as much detail as possible as to what they talked about and really what that means going forward when it comes to trade. Of course, we have spoken on our side. Sources have been telling us that there are a number of countries on the table. Officials have been coming out publicly as well. Some are saying India, and there's been some talk with the EU. But for all of them, China is really, really important, and so this could really be the next step in figuring out what comes next with regard to trade between the two countries.
What are the sticking points? There are a lot, but what's the main sticking point at this time?
Right. There's, as you mentioned, so many things. There's a lot with minerals. That's something that we are still trying to get a little bit more info out of. Some things that there have been more kind of hostile relations just in the past few days, of course, with what's been going on with the president in terms of his immigration agenda. Most recently, putting out this statement that foreign students, from China being one of the groups impacted with regard to this student visa ban. As you know, on the immigration front, where the focus of most of my reporting, there has really been kind of a ramping up on the kind of education front. Of course, Harvard taking being the main kind of target from the president, and really trying to bring back or kind of restrict the number of foreign students coming in as we see a rise in these instances tied to anti-Semitism. And of course now last night we have this travel ban, which has an additional dozen or so countries on it. And that again is really the kind of latest step in terms of the president's immigration agenda.
Adriana, thank you so much. We appreciated that. Adriana Lowenkron, White House reporter for Bloomberg News. We will look for some confirmation from the White House on whether the President Trump and President Xi did in fact hold that call. And we get that, we will bring that to you. Let's get back to these markets here. We want to check in with Nancy Daoud, private wealth advisor, Ameriprise Financial. It's interesting, Nancy, we've had almost a full retracement in the S&P 500 from the sell-off earlier this year, due in part to some of the rollouts of those tariffs. What's the conversation like with your clients today? Are they just kind of whipsawed? What do they want to talk about?
I pluss på guldshorten igjen, og denne sitter litt rolig, ser man bryter ned.
Or maybe I should put it more like it's a desensitization at this point, because at first when on Liberation Day, when everything was rolled out, it was a shock to the system. There's a very big change here, and human behavior doesn't respond well to change. Even when we know it's a good thing, but we don't really know if it's a good or a bad thing at this point, but it's still a change. And at this point, because the pattern has become somewhat predictable, you know, where there's something crazy that happens or a very big announcement that turns the world upside down, usually through social media, then there's a pullback with a negotiation period, which allows investors or the market to breathe a little bit. And then there's the actual negotiation. So it's kind of like the Trump tariff three-step process that has now almost become predictable. So investors are feeling a little more comfortable with it. And of course, it doesn't hurt that the S&P is back almost up to its all-time highs again. Well,
to that point, actually, Charlie Miguel got over at Nomura had a really interesting quote. He said something along the lines of, like, if you had bought buy the dip, betting against the S&P futures every time President Donald Trump escalated trade rhetoric and then buying them back 5 days later would have yielded you 12% versus flat for the broader S&P since the beginning of February, like to your exact point. Okay, so what do you do to avoid all the noise? What's the best strategy?
Just stick to your plan, stick to your investment process, because the data is ultimately what rules, not the narrative, not the, you know, all of the noise that we hear every day. I think it's almost clear now that this is all going to settle down eventually, not in the near term, but longer term, I think it's going to spell growth. I mean, it's clear that President Trump is rewriting the rules of global trade, and we just need to get used to that and work around it. The tech sector, energy, small caps are making a comeback. I mean, even international has actually been very positive. So the data is the data, and GDP is up. The Q1 earnings were stellar. Inflation is down. In fact, we are almost at the target of what the Fed was targeting. And they weren't even expecting to reach that 2% until mid next year, 2026. The jobs, we don't know what the report will say tomorrow, but it looks pretty solid. And the consumer balance sheets and spending is...
How do you position alternative investments, whether it's private equity, private credit, hedge funds, that kind of thing, for your clients?
Well, alternatives absolutely have a place in every portfolio, to the tune of at least 10 to 20%, depending on the portfolio and the risk involved. And the most important reason is because alternatives, by definition, are not correlated to stocks and bonds. So when all hell breaks loose, so to speak, those will prevail, hopefully. So it definitely has a place in everybody's portfolio, but it just depends on the time frame of the investment and the appetite for risk of the investor.
What do you think about, say, gold, for example, right? Like, it's not a typical alternative, right? But it has been a real stalwart in this environment. Do you think, are you recommending clients to sort of increase that exposure?
Not necessarily gold specifically, but in general, commodities, there's a small amount of percentage of each portfolio that should have some commodities. Again, just as a hedge, but not specifically gold.
Short Nasdaq.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Nancy Doe, Private Wealth Advisor for Ameriprise Financial. And again, I just kind of go back to what we learned over the last couple of days at PNC. These people are talking about derivative alternative investments in a pretty big way.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Boy,
Remember there was
I
something
don't
that
even think I
said
had
50% was
Yeah.
like some allocation. I was like, oh my gosh, for some of the big guys.
Well, I was shocked when I first got down to the Duke board to find out how much is allocated there. And that's kind of the Yale model where they go 50% or something like that. I was like, really?
I mean, you just have to then think like, are the risks well known? Like, are you knowledgeably exchanging liquidity for yield? And if that's the case, then that's great, right? I mean, as long as everyone is on the same page as understanding what you're giving up and what you're getting at the same time. Here's what I'm going to be getting. I'm going to be getting a conversation in power. Oh yes, we heard the Meta and Constellation Energy deal the other day. That was a big deal for nuclear power. Meta Platforms also announced a deal today to get green credits from a U.S. solar energy project. We are going to talk to the company behind that project. The founder and CEO of Invenergy will be joining us, Michael Polsky, coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
Hva skjedde der da? Hva skjedde med Nasdaq? Du, se på Nasdaqen hvis du har short. Hva kom nå et eller annet fra Trump nå, eller? Jeg er så lei av den der tilbakestående jævla idioten der. Nå, det kom et eller annet nå. Ikke noe news, ikke noe news. Hva skjedde nå her? Og det på G-hall. Ja, det bra. Sanderson Fries. Ja, hvem kjører det? Yes. Ja, altså flytte til hvordan? Olsen. Ja. Så studerer jeg. Ja. Koser da. Ja. Hva er det som skjer på Nasdaq nå? Det er ikke noe news, det er ingenting. Hva er det som skjer nå? Det er ikke noe. Den video går ikke opp. Det er ingen av det store. Trump er sånn at du prater nå, eller? Ta gevinst på gull igjen. Altså, Nasdaq bare går. Hva er det som skjer? Er det noen som har noen nyheter på Nasdaq, eller? Hvorfor i helvete den går? Gull går riktig vei, men Nasdaqen den går helt feil vei på drittnews. Tesla ned, eller... Ingen av de store her som drar på med ingenting. Alt er jo... Tesla er bra ned, Nvidia er ned, Apple er ned, Microsoft...
De har fått inn Chanel
Faen,
Vest
nå
svart.
skutt og skyt.
De har fått inn Chanel Vest svart.
Kan ikke dere si sånn, jeg
Oh
trader.
my god.
Helvete for et
Å, det
hette
er
her.
en Kelly Chanel.
Faen, på hjertefark her.
Du, det er ganske sykt, altså, for jeg tenkte på det i går. Jeg manifesterte den jævla veska.
Jeg driter i Vestvaret.
Nå ble jeg gira.
Hæ? Ikke si så faen, helvete da.
Det koster 56 000.
Hva så? Du sitter ballefeil natta. Du bare drite og kjøpe den nå.
Nei, jeg skal ha det. Det tar penger fra firmaet mitt. Kjøre saftig lønn for å få deg noen veska på det samme.
Nå kommer Nasdaq ned. Hva er det som dro den opp da? Merkelig greit. Short og gull igjen. Jeg holdt på å få hjertefark. Skriker liksom.
Å, herregud, jeg må ha den veska. Jeg så den i går, jeg var sånn faen.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg News with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Right now, the major averages kind of mixed. The NASDAQ 100 just turned positive, up 25 points, up a tenth of a percent. The S&P 500, 6 points lower. That's down a tenth of a percent, 59.64 in the index. And the Dow is 69 points lower. So we're getting some headlines, a little more detail on that phone call between President Xi Jinping of China and President Trump this morning, which was initially reported by the Xinhua news agency. So here's the headline. Xi tells Trump U.S. should remove negative measures on China. You know, take that for what it's worth. Added attention on the non-farm payrolls report. That's out tomorrow morning after applications for U.S. unemployment benefits unexpectedly rose to the highest since October. That points to cooling. Initial claims increasing by 8,000 to 247,000. Multiple large companies, this includes Microsoft, Walt Disney, and Booz Allen Hamilton Holding, have recently said they're cutting jobs. Planet Labs, that is popping off the screen. A record jump this morning. The company's first quarter revenue topping expectations. Those shares right now, Planet Labs, 60% higher in this morning's trading. Kimberly-Clark forming a joint venture with a Brazilian pulp supplier. Kimberly-Clark selling a majority stake in their global Kleenex and tissue business, this outside of North America. And starting today, this is one that gets my blood boiling. Customers across the country can order stuff from 1,500 Five Below stores through Uber Eats app and then have them delivered directly to... Now, the whole idea of going to Five Below is to save money on these little items, and then you pay Uber apps to have it
that's why you're
delivered.
spending the money, because you're then paying Uber apps.
I just want to let me just put it out there. If this happens at my house, I'm going to have a stroke, and you know who I'm talking to.
Yes.
Anyway, we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul.
All right, thanks so much, John Tucker. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We're broadcasting to you live from our interactive broker studio right here in Midtown Manhattan. Also check us out on YouTube as well. So the news that came out on Tuesday was that Meta and Constellation Energy met what they call a virtual purchase power agreement. So it's basically an investment to secure clean energy from Constellation, but there are lots of different nuances to that. They're not the only one out there. Today we also learned that, well, back in December, Meta Platforms also announced a deal to buy green credits from 4 large U.S. solar energy projects. And the owner of that project joins us now. Michael Polsky is founder and CEO of Invenergy. And Invenergy is one of the biggest, largest independent power producers in the United States. Nat gas plants, solar, onshore, offshore wind, storage, as well as transmission. Really has his pulse on the market right now. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. And we have to add natural gas as well.
Yes, no, I said that. I said natural gas. I did. Plants. So you have all that clean stuff. How hard is it to reach these agreements with the hyperscalers right now? What are those conversations like?
Obviously, these are large-scale agreements, so it's not easy to just walk in and these are those big deals. So, first of all, we have to make sure that both sides, so that we agree on that, suppliers have sufficient supplies and satisfy buyer requirements. Is what is also important that certain reliability standards are being met, and most importantly, the pricing has to be appropriate for a buyer to agree to buy this.
Another headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal, President Xi, President Trump agreed to start new round of talks ASAP. That's according to CCTV. We'll bring you continued reporting on that. Michael, is the Trump administration making your business, the development of your business, the expansion of your business easier, more difficult, no real impact yet? What have you seen?
Clearly, the administration sent very right sign. President announced energy emergency, which I believe there is an energy emergency because we have to build, there is increased demand and we have to build more supplies, and more supplies we have to build. If we build like we used to do it, it would take too long. So it's really an emergency. So we try to, in energy, we try to build as much supply as possible. What is also very important, not just supply, but transmission. I mean, one of our biggest developments right now is critical to meet sort of this emergency is to build more transmission lines. I always like to say that
Men hva er det som, fy faen Gud fader da? Og hva er det som gjør at den neste går seg nå? Hva skjer?
In order for electrons to move, we need transmission lines. And if we have transmission, then we can shorten time to interconnect a facility. We have to be able to move power from where it's produced to where it's used. And I think we can really build infrastructure a lot faster here and with a lot more impact.
To your point, Goldman Sachs had a note out today talking about how power is already tight in the Northeast. There was a report out yesterday that said the development of data centers to the largest U.S. grid and PJM is raising costs by almost $10 billion because we just can't build it out fast enough. What's the biggest hurdle?
Er det noen som vet hvorfor Nasdaq går bananas? Det er ikke kommet noe nytt som jeg kan se noen steder.
I think there are multiple. One is obviously permitting because it takes forever permit and.
Supposedly that's all going to be fixed now. Has that all been fixed?
I mean, it's in the process. Obviously, there are good announcements. We have to see as a business. We have to see how it's going to be implemented because implementation is very important. But it's not just permitting. I think transmission has to be appropriately paid for. And right now, particularly for long-distance transmission, we don't have a methodology in this country how to pay for transmission. So there's a lot of, intention to build. And the only really transmission being built, the one that recovered by utilities or RTOs through the ratepayer. The moment you touch something that is not typical and normal, then it's very difficult. So we have to really come up with appropriate methodology to value transmission and allocate the cost of transmission. I think, in my opinion, for this administration, for Department of Energy, that should be really one of the most important tests to build our infrastructure.
Here it is.
I did read the book, The Grid. So it took me a whole summer to get through it, and it was not an easy read, but I think I have some understanding of it. What's your sense overall of power grid in the United States? How good is it? How bad is it? How much investment does it need?
Obviously, there are a lot of discussions about grid right now. They're being used like antiquated, old, not reliable, which is true in many ways because most of our grid has been built 30, 40 years ago. And there are a lot of change since then. I mean, for example, we used to have very centralized way of generating electricity from very large coal, nuclear, sometimes gas power plants. Now we have a lot more decentralized generation, number one. Another issue is that our weather pattern has changed. I mean, now we have a lot more, inclement weather. We have ice storms, what we've seen in Texas. We have floods, we have
Du kan bare kalle meg Gullgutten. Det er helt greit.
other events, which shows that generation itself is susceptible. We cannot make 100%
Det er lyd,
sort
ja,
of
på lyd.
guaranteed generation. So how to deal with this? We have to connect. I like to call larger geography, so power can move from here to there, just like roads, right? If we only go from here to there on one road, and that something happened with that road, and we cannot avoid that, then all the traffic will be stopped for days. We cannot avoid this, so we have to have transmission. So,
but based on that, you said the sort of financing this transmission is key. How would that work? I get it for the regulated utilities, but if you wanted a transmission line across multiple states, how could the financing work to make sense for an independent player like you?
This is a fundamental problem here, right? We in the United States we talk about reliability, we talk about national security, but